I'm Steve Westman, LiveAudiophileRoundtable, Roundtable, how to perfect your turntable setup with, well, Michael T's here, of course. Michael T, how are you?
I'm great. I am ready to perfect my turntable setup. Actually, I brought my turntable with me here.
Perfect. Does that have the 45 RPM option and the
Yeah,
78?
and I brought my my Taylor Swift record. I'm ready to go.
You just need the Taylor Swift shirt. I mean,
I want it to sound better. I really want it to sound better.
Last week you had the Justin Bieber shirt on. Now you got that. Yeah. So, okay, you want it to sound better. Who are we bringing on the show that to help us make our turntable sound better? Who do we got?
We have someone that is considered one of the definitive authorities in the world. I'll say that, yeah. And I saw him do presentations at Pacific Audio Fest for a couple of years in a row. Yeah. And I really found his presentations interesting. And I know people that actually use his alignment gear. His name is J.R. Bosclair from WallyTools.
And there he is, J.R. Bosclair from WallyTools. Hello,
magically appear. Hello.
How are you
guys?
Very good,
man.
We wanted to keep this tight because, you know, we want to learn a lot about WallyTools and why we should use WallyTools for our setup and for our turntable. So let's get right into it. I know Michael's got a ton of questions for JR, and we'll take some questions from the audience, the viewers later on, but let's keep it tight and really get into the nuts and bolts of this. Because I honestly, JR, I don't know much about WallyTools. So this is, for me, a real great introduction, probably for like a lot of the people watching today.
Fantastic. All right.
So, hey, JR, so I think we should just start at the basics. I think I'm going to make an assumption, but I think, Steve, that most people that watch the Audiophile Roundtable, they go to a dealer, they buy a turntable, the dealer installs a cartridge for them and aligns it, and either delivers it to their house or they take it home and they set it up. And then they listen to records with it, and that's kind of the end of it.
I'd say that's right.
That's really common for about probably what 80% of people, 90% of people.
Yeah.
Am I right, JR?
Yeah. Yes. That you are definitely right. Most people will rely on their dealers to install it for them and tune things up, and we're certainly finding that there's a lot left on the table, so to speak.
So, JR, do you cringe when you hear about people buying Crosley's? I shouldn't say the name, sorry.
No, I think to myself, great, there's somebody who's
more customers.
The gateway, right? You know, and as long what I cringe at is when they start to have problems, when they're dissatisfied with the sound and they're given bad advice, and eventually that road has a dead end to it and they give up on vinyl, right? And then it's done, and then they're out. That's what irritates me. So usually when we hear a problem, we're good at hearing that there is a problem, but audiophiles generally, and certainly vinylphiles, are really bad at ascribing the problem to the right reason.
So a lot of the time, I mean, especially on our show, we talk about good sounding vinyl, audiophile pressings, remastered from the best engineers, best equipment out there, et cetera, best vinyl. Then you have some issues like, I don't know, intergroove distortion or sibilance.
Yeah.
So how can you help us with that?
Well, okay. So I do a weekly video series called Sound Bites. I try to keep the videos down to 5 minutes or less. And you mentioned two things that I've already done videos on: sibilance and mistracking and what causes it. And what was the other thing you mentioned? Oh, intergroove distortion. It's not what you think it is. Okay. So in most cases, when we're dissatisfied with the sound, it's not the cartridge, it's the tone arm.
So it's not the record most times?
Well, okay. So no, I mean, if you hear the same phenomenon over multiple records, then you can't blame the record, right? But if you're continuing to get what, I'm going to use your terms, intergroove distortion or sibilance that you know is mechanical, not due to like spitty tweeters or something like that, almost always that's a tone arm related problem, not a cartridge related problem. But cartridge manufacturers get the blame for that wrongly. So when I say it's a tone arm problem, the horizontal forces are being mismanaged, or the static friction of the bearings are too high.
So hold on here. I just want to just wrap this around my little head here. Okay. It's not a cartridge thing most times, what I'm hearing from you, which is probably what most of us here would assume, but it's a tone arm issue.
Yeah, they think,
Yeah.
oh, my stylus is worn out, my needle is worn out. That's the common misconception, correct?
Right.
I need a new cartridge.
That's
And
correct.
so and you get these people, okay, I want to buy a new cartridge, but they ignore the tone arm.
That's right. That's right. And then their opinion is solidified when they buy a new cartridge and that symptom goes away, right? Now, why did that symptom go away? Well, flip. You had a sedan and now you're driving a race car, okay? Or vice versa. The conditions have changed. There's different compliance in the two cartridges. They're going to have varying levels of forgiveness, right? So the most of the time, like if we're suffering from just a lack of vitality, we probably all at one point heard this, our system just lacks vitality and verve and snap. That's 90% of the time a tone arm issue. When we hear the sibilance and mistracking, 90% the tone arm issue. There are some less likely issues that crop up, but that's why the Wally skater, some fellow right there mentioned it, the Wally skater is my most important tool.
Yeah, JR. So what I've noticed, for example, people that are having entry-level cartridges like an Audiophile 2M red or blue, they'll say, oh, I heard some distortion on the 2M red, so I'm going to go buy the 2M black. All of a sudden it went away now because I spent $800 instead of $100.
Yeah,
that's a common thing I've heard or seen in
and
forums.
it's not necessarily, the problem wasn't necessarily the cartridge. And then they think, okay, well, that problem's gone now, and then they continue living life happily. Probably not. That problem is probably not gone. It's just that it's receded closer to your noise floor now. And if you fix that problem, and again, it's almost always horizontal forces are out of control on the tone arm, or static friction is too high. The arm doesn't want to move. You fix that problem, the cartridge you now have will just sound better.
So JR, WallyTools here, we had a viewer. I have the protractor, the Wally skater, and the Wally reference. And he is saying the best thing I did for my turntable setup. I mean, we're getting a lot of positives from these comments right now. So people that use your products. I mean, we've got the next one here. Eric, love the tone arm in my project. So
yeah,
a lot of positives here from the people that use your products.
Well, part of my what I do is, look, if you own my tools, you pretty much have access to me 7 days a week, and my clients realize that because I'm really quick at getting back or answering the phone. And as I realized that, even with the videos, and I've done lots of instructional and informational videos to help people understand what's going on and how to use the tools and how to improve the sound. Even with that, I need to be available because sometimes they'll run into a problem that I can't fix, right? That they can't fix. And so we'll walk through it together. And I usually learn things when I listen to other people's really unusual situations. So it's good for me too. Yeah, and then there's, so yes, I'll stop there before I go down a rabbit hole.
We mentioned all the different videos that you put out so people can watch the different setups. I see one here, WallyTools cartridge setup process, 7 analog alignment targets. Yeah. This is the key. I mean, as we all watch this, we all want great sound. That's why a lot of people watch these shows. It's not, you could have the greatest sounding record, but if your record player isn't producing the greatest sound, it's almost pointless to have that record. You're spending, for instance, on those UHQR or the MoFi one steps, $125, $150, almost pointless, right? If it's not aligned correctly.
I've learned a lot from your videos watching the ones about anti-skate, because the anti-skate is such a controversial topic.
Well, tell us about that anti-skate. I'd like to hear more in your opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I just concluded a 6-video series on what causes anti-skate, what causes skating force, and what to do about it, whether we would want to do anything about it, and how to do something about it. So what's been very poorly illustrated to the public is what causes that force. All right, we're not going to do it by sharing formulas. I got to show them. So in the video, I open up my CAD program and I showed them that what's called an effective moment arm that causes it. And then I showed how that varies over the playing surface and how it varies depending on arm construction. Here's the problem with, that's me with a Wally skater, yeah. So old version, by the way.
I like your Jimi Hendrix picture there. That's cool.
I'm sure you recognize that location, right, Mike?
That's Audio Ultra. I think that's a Dolman turntable,
That's
right?
Ed DeVito's
And
place.
it looks like a Kuzma Saphir arm. It looks like, right?
It is, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's before he got the SATs. So, here's the challenge with when you've got, see, a skating force is a horizontal torque force. An anti-skating force is also a horizontal torque force, and it's going in the opposite direction. If you don't balance those two things out, what happens? The horizontal torque force gets passed to the cartridge motor damper. Now, the damper is, okay, so if here's the stylus down here, and then there's the pivot. Let's do it the other way. Here's the stylus down here, and here's the pivot point. Back here is about 6 to 7 millimeters going here, and then there's a coil former here, and then behind there's an elastomer damper, and the pivot point is right there. There's a 7 to 1 or 6 to 1 lever arm. So for every 1 unit of errant horizontal force here, you're going to multiply it by 6 or 7 on one side of the damper and minus 6 or 7 on the other side of the damper. So very, very quickly, that precious little ignored damper goes asymmetrically compressed, and our performance starts suffering, and we don't even notice it. It's one of those audiophile things that you don't know what you're missing until you have it back. You don't even notice that there's this asymmetric force, and that's deteriorating your soundstage and sense of naturalness. But then when it gets bad enough, then you get sibilance and mistracking. Right?
So if I was just buying a decent record player, let's say $1,000 player,
yeah,
what would I need from you, from WallyTools, to really make my $1,000 record player play the best it can? What would people need to get from you?
Yeah, well, the two basic tools are the Wally Tractor and Wally Skater. But I must admit, man, if you're going to spend $1,000 on a turntable, are you going to spend almost $700 on some tools to fix it? I realize that there's a potential imbalance there, but I suppose it's all up to your priorities. I've got multiple guys who buy $500 to $600 cartridges, who send every one of them to me for analysis, and the analysis costs $500. And I asked them, why do you do that? They said, because I can hear the difference, and that's my priority. I love this cartridge, and I want to hear everything there is to hear out of it. So I confess that for some people, the priorities may not be there.
Some might see that return on investment, right? If they really want to get the most out of their turntable and their cartridge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So JR, you're saying they could send you a couple of the same cartridge model and you'll see variations between them?
Big time. Huge,
really?
Huge.
The same model? Okay.
It's absolutely the same model. Yeah, and that's because all cartridge manufacturers purchase their Stylus cantilever assembly from one of 3 manufacturers. Okay. So only 3 manufacturers really for high-end audio for the Stylus cantilever assemblies. And those have wide tolerances that we can hear if we fix it. I did another video in my Soundbite series on the title was Why Do Some Audiophiles Own Many Cartridges? And what I found is that when people send me when people who own a big stable of cartridges send me their cartridges for analysis, I always ask, okay, why do you have so many cartridges? And they inevitably say, well, I like this cartridge for this characteristic, and this one does great dynamics, and this one's got great resolution, but the soundstage isn't so great, blah, 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 blah. And then I make a prediction for them. I say, okay, you're sending me 5 or so cartridges. I'm going to analyze all of them, and my prediction is when this is done, you will keep 2, and it'll be this one and that one. I usually make a prediction. And universally, that's true. Maybe they'll keep them, but they at least will not be listening to them so much anymore. Why? Because in most cases, what we hear when we listen to different cartridges is in part how they sound different from each other, but in large part how we're listening to the errors built in each of them. And when you equalize for those angular errors, which there are 4, cartridges sound more similar, not more different.
So JR, wouldn't this be your tools? Wouldn't that be great if you could collaborate with certain turntable companies and have the WallyTools collaboration with whatever turntable company? Have you tried that route? Where they get the WallyTools experience right out of the gate as soon as they open their box with their turntable and have that as part of their turntable when they buy it.
So yes, we have. Sorry, dog's going nuts. I have to put him outside. No, excuse me. So I'm sorry. I apologize. Can you repeat the question? I was distracted.
So I was curious to know, I mean, having a collaboration with certain record player companies and having the Wally tools inside the box when you open it up, so you have that advantage out of the gate, and having those collaboration with these record companies. Is that something you've had conversations with certain companies with? Yeah,
well, like for example, there is one tone arm company that on their highest end tone arm, they include a Wally tractor that's specific only to that tone arm. But I have talked to a few of manufacturers about this, but part of what I sell when I'm selling my tools is also a service. So you need help, you reach out to me. So of course these manufacturers are expecting a discount, but I still want anybody who owns a Wally tool to be my client, right? I want to have that direct connection. And so I don't want to lose that connection. So I learn a lot from these connections. I learn a lot from the conversations I have, learning about unique situations out there. So yes, I've had the conversations, but it's not really an area of focus. I've got so many, about 2.5 days of every week for me is all research, which doesn't pay very much.
I'm being corrected. Turntable, not record player.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that the same difference? I like this, Gary S. So it's amazing how many high-end dealers have never heard of Wally tools.
Yeah. Well, so I don't sell through dealers. That's first reason.
Yeah.
This is true. And it's amazing how little so many dealers even know about the product that they're selling.
So I'm going to put this up. What am I looking at here?
So that's the Wally reference kit. That is to align the underside of your head shell. All right. So depending on which blade you're using, and to allow you to measure as little as 1/10 of a degree variation in the angle on 2 axes of the head shell. So this is an important kit to have if you're going to get an analysis from me, a cartridge analysis, because I'm going to make a corrective shim for you, but we need the same reference, perfectly level to the record at a height equaling the height of your cartridge.
Let me stop here there. So you mentioned shim. So I'm looking at this. Is that what you're making for your customers after you give them the analysis?
Yes. Okay. And people's first reaction is, well, you shouldn't put anything between your cartridge and your head shell. And my answer is, I agree. And I did a video on this. But all things, all engineering efforts don't weigh equally. And if you could hear, since the average VTA correction that's needed in this market is 9 degrees. 9. And we can talk about that, but I did a video on that. 9 degrees. Now, you cannot get more than like 1.5 degrees out of your tone arm. And I don't want you to do that even if you could, because you're changing many variables when you change your arm height, not just VTA. That's not what you're hearing. You're hearing vector forces changing. So the corrective shims get your attitude of your cartridge to the point where the VTA falls more in line with how lacquers are actually cut. And then it'll give you the right azimuth angle as well.
So normally we've heard of 6 degrees of separation, but JR is now expanding that to 9 degrees of separation is what I'm hearing.
9 degrees in VTA, yes. Yeah, and I've made this claim publicly at the Munich show last year with Leif Johansson of Audiophile there. And publicly twice he's agreed to it with me that the whole industry is way too high. In fact, we've known about this since 1964. There was an engineering paper done back then where they were saying the same thing. Cartridge manufacturers, get your butt down. But the reason they do it is because most people don't manage their tone arms.
JR, so what's JR's favorite curve for 9-inch tone arms? Which curve gives a most balanced sound?
Well, I thank you for the question, but this is an example. The question is an example of how bad all of us are on identifying what's the reason for the sound that we're hearing. Whether it's a J arm or S arm or a straight arm is somewhere close to immaterial. Until you're working with finite element analysis and you can study the propagation characteristics of energy down the tube, I reject the proposition that it's a major difference at all. Full stop. Full stop. Where we are hearing something and attributing what we hear to the wrong thing. Now, maybe I've misunderstood the spirit of the question, which is entirely possible.
So which curve gives the most balanced sound?
No, I reject the question.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Let's move on to this one. So today, I believe GR says all arms should be parallel to the platter, thus the shims.
Yes, correct, because that's when you've got the vector forces. That's subject for another day. Vector forces in best balance. Okay. Then if you need to make a change to VTA, you do it at the head shell where you can hear what it sounds like to change VTA in isolation without the influence of the changing vector forces.
So I think GFY is saying I meant which curve.
Which
curve?
Very much.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good.
So Bearwald, Lofgren, or Stevenson?
I did a video on this too. Okay.
That's shocking.
Yes. Okay. So here's, and this kind of goes to what we were talking earlier about linear trackers, Michael. The differences between them and the sonic characteristics they will throw off are so tiny as to we're not hearing what we think we're hearing. Okay, why am I saying that? Well, there's multiple studies been actually done on, see, when your cantilever is out of alignment, off of tangency, it throws off a nonlinear distortion that's a second order distortion, which we can find pleasing, by the way. Okay. Now, but the difference between, say, Lofgren or Stevenson, we're talking in the nature of about 0.2 degrees. Now, that's not very audible. The nonlinear distortion isn't very audible at all. What is audible is zenith error, or what should be called Stylus yaw, which is the focus of our study. Now, that's what we're hearing. So
can you define what zenith error is?
Yeah. So here's a model of a fine line contact stylus. All right, it's got a nice ridge line here, right? And it rides in the groove this way, coming towards you, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a contact point there. There's a contact point there. Now, if you were to draw a line between those two contact points, we live under the faith that that line is perpendicular to our cantilever. Because after all, we align our cantilevers at the null point using a protractor, hopefully. But I told you there's 3 manufacturers of these in the world. They've got a tolerance, assuming this is the cantilever.
So, JR, let me interrupt you there. I wanted more layman terms. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So zenith error, what I'm hearing from you is that when the stylus is maybe slightly off axis, is that pretty much what a zenith error would be called?
Yes. So when it's twisted on the cantilever.
So it's not perpendicular. So ideally it's perpendicular, right? Yeah.
Ideally it's perpendicular, because then that would retrace the path and keep left channel and right channel perfectly in time with each other, just like how lacquers are cut. And
the zenith error could be when the cartridge was manufactured, not necessarily from alignment, right? Oh yeah, it happens at manufacture. I've seen a $16,000 cartridge with 20.2 degrees of zenith error. Now the manufacturers are allowed ±5, which is crazy because you can hear as little as a ½ degree. But it's not the type of distortion that calls attention to itself, like sibilance or mistracking. It's just one of those audiophile things that when you fix it, it's like, whoa, clarity.
So going back, I mean, that's my opening question was sibilance and intergroove distortion. Yeah. If you're hearing it just on one record, maybe it might be the pressing, but if you're hearing it throughout your different pressings, clearly it's, like you said before, clearly it's a tone arm issue.
Usually, yes.
There's something you brought up that I wanted to ask you about a minute ago, and that was at the end of our last live stream when Steve and I were on. Someone mentioned, I don't need to worry about alignment because I have a linear tracking turntable and everything's taken care of.
Yeah.
So explain why that's not the case.
Yeah, because what the ear is most sensitive to is the timing between the left and the right contact edges, right? Now, we know that the fellows with the linear tracker would have aligned the cantilever, right, to be tangential to the groove, and it stays tangential to groove across the record. But each model, each serial number is different in terms of its zenith error. So you might be playing it at 4 degrees error the whole way across. Okay. And,
so
and
whatever error the cartridge has, you're playing for literally the whole side of the record, right?
Yes. Plus, there's still the same problem with the VTA being too high. That has nothing to do with linear tracker. And then, depending on what type of linear tracker bearing you have, some of those bearings have incredibly high static friction. I mean, it's embarrassing. Some of these really expensive linear trackers when I put it on the Wally skater, you see how little they want to even move. Now, if you got an air bearing, that's almost never an issue.
Here's a rabbit hole then. So when you're a master engineer and you're cutting it to lathe, would they need better alignment on the cutter?
Yeah. So we cut a lot of lacquers for our research, and we work with a number of engineers in Greece, New York State, and Berlin and LA. And so I've been to the studios because when we cut our lacquers, one, I need to make sure that the cutting stylus is symmetrical.
So question then, do most master engineers who have that equipment aren't getting proper alignment, or they do it themselves, or what are they using?
They're basically roughing in. And so you might say, well, geez, JR, if the errors can be high at the time of cutting, which they are, and I can talk more about it if you care to, then you say, well, why does it matter? Why does it matter to get it right at playback? And I have an answer. It has to do with statistics. The degree to which they can err in their setup is equally likely in the clockwise direction versus counterclockwise, but they all aim at the same thing. So if you were to tabulate, let's say, the cutting error across 1,000 records and tabulate it on a graph, you get a beautiful normal distribution curve. You got the tails, those are the bad errors, and then you got the bulk of all the cuts. We aim for the middle, the mean.
Greg was asking, hi, GR, when is your test record going to be available?
Well,
and what does he mean by test record? Tell us.
So, a lot of people assume that I'm putting on a test record. Some people know that we have made, and I've got them right here, test records for our own research, and so perhaps this year. We've been studying. We cut. I was there for the cutting in Berlin. We sent lacquers off to a place to be plated both in Germany and in LA, and then we had them pressed in LA, and then we had them injected at Sonopress in Germany. We're going to compare them both, but we're analyzing side A. We've been analyzing side A for 6 weeks, so it's a slow process of understanding what we have.
So lots of us watching have large record collections. I'm assuming you have a sizable one as well. Is there one specific pressing that you use sort of as your reference or source when you are doing all your alignments and testing?
Well, I don't align by ear because I know I can do better with a parametric approach. I know what my angular targets are and aim for them. But when I want to assess how everything is sounding, I love the Azimuth's Royal Ballet.
And why is that? Tell us why.
Besides being an absolutely beautiful recording, it's a symphonic recording that was beautifully recorded. Tonally, everything is just right. It has subsonic information because if you've got the chops with your system, you're going to hear the subway going under. I think it's King's Hall, right? Same
with Witch's Brew.
Really?
That one too. That was recorded in the same place. Yeah.
The ability to separate, to be able to see the separation of the instrumentalists, the size of the sound stage, the tonality, the transient impact. It's like it's got everything, and I love that.
Going to be selling. That's going to go up on Discogs now. People will be buying that one.
Well, that is available still. Chad has it out at Acoustic Sounds as a 45 RPM Originally, it was a 9-disc 45. I have that. The
Yeah.
Classic Records put out.
Yeah.
And it's available as a double LP also. Yeah.
That's
Fantastic
my
sound.
Desert Island LP. If I could only have one, that would be it. Yeah, it's so
Can never
beautiful.
get sick of it. Spin it every day. Be hard to find power on a desert island, but I get it.
Yeah. Yes, true.
I want to take some more questions from the viewers. So if you have any questions, go for it. JFY was asking this, JR, if you want to answer.
Yeah.
Would that mean
absolutely.
Conical Stylus is not prone to zenith error?
What does that mean?
Absolutely. Because here's a conical stylus. It has no formed contact point.
It's a circle, basically, right?
Yeah, basically it's a spheroid surface.
It's a sphere, yeah.
Right? As opposed to these, which have specific contact points. So yeah, there's less I can do to help you optimize when you have one of these. These are far more forgiving, but because there's never in the history of record cutting was there ever a lacquer cut with a shape like this, you can guarantee that you're not going to get everything out of the groove. It's just an absolute certainty. It's mechanically impossible to read everything in the groove from this. Doesn't mean it's going to sound bad. That is not what I'm saying. But yes, if you've got a conical stylus, then zenith error isn't an issue. VTA is still an issue. And of course, channel crosstalk, azimuth. Yes. Oh, the Royal Ballet. The Answermet, the Royal Ballet. I don't have it in here.
Yeah, if you type in Royal Ballet on Music Direct, Elucid Disc, or Acoustic Sounds, you'll find it. It's got a yellow cover.
That's right, with two ballerinas in the front.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic recording. Yeah. So look, I want to make it clear that
it is.
Yeah. I want to make it clear that I am not saying to anybody that if you are misaligned in your tone arm and your cartridge, that you're not going to have good sound. You can have great sound. Would never take that away from anybody. Or if you've got a conical stylus, I'm not going to say you have bad sound. I'm saying that it's a mechanical impossibility to get everything there is out of the groove if you aren't perfectly aligned to read the groove in the same manner at which it was cut with a facsimile of that same cutting tip. Yeah. Class recordings done are sought after doing something. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, this isn't for me. This is all scientific experiment. That's why I'm doing these tests here with using an accelerometer on this tone arm to study displacement behavior at the head shell, because there's a lot of information there for us to use to make better sounding tone arms.
So JR, as an audiophile, you go more statistics, more analytics than just the ear, is what I'm understanding today.
Because when I listen, I don't want to think about this stuff. I don't. I just want to be emotionally involved, and I don't want to be drawn into the what ifs. I don't want to be drawn into, do I need to change this or change that? I'm not a tweaker. Believe it or not, I'm not. You will never catch me changing arm height on record thickness. Never. I'm an emotional focus when I'm in listening to records.
So once we start getting into higher end cartridges, I wanted to ask you, JR, do you have a favorite type of stylus profile? We have like Micro Ridge, we have Fritz Geiger, and we have Agura.
Yeah,
so they're the three main ones, right? Agura, Fritz Geiger, and Orbre.
Orbre, that's correct.
Yeah. Which one do you like the best?
Orbre. Yeah.
The Micro Ridge.
Well, so Micro Ridge is, I don't know what even really that means, because it's been used as a marketing slogan, and I've seen manufacturers name something as Micro Ridge when it was clearly an elliptical. So you can't get away from it when you're looking at a microscope like that. That thing costs more than my car. That's a pretty powerful one. So look, Japanese styluses or Ogura or Orbre have a lot more error in terms of their insertion accuracy than the Swiss Geiger, but they last so much longer because you got this beautiful ridge line. You see that ridge line? So as this wears out, it stays the same radius, and then it's gone. Then one day it's just gone, and then you've got basically an elliptical or a conical stylus.
So
But
So JR Bosi is asking for Azimuth. You recommended maximizing stereo separation between the channels, but doesn't this misalign the stylus, leading to worse HF reproduction, more harmonic distortion, and worse tracking?
So it's typical to understand what based on the question, what the underlying assumption is, but I believe it is what most people think. Most people think that what matters for Azimuth is the position of the stylus in the groove. But that doesn't. It has nothing to do with maximum channel separation. The position of the stylus in the groove has nothing to do with maximum stereo separation. It has to do with the relationship between the groove wall, which is 45 degrees, and the coils, which are way back here. I did a video on this too, showing an animation why that's true. Okay, so these styluses have a radius on them that allow them to be wonky in the groove and still play perfectly. That's what they're designed for.
Tublandi is saying, seems like linear tracking arms are most accurate to the way the record is cut.
Well, this is true, but the devil's in the details. Again,
Okay.
did a video on that too.
So let me go back to this. So videos, www.wallyanalog.com. You can get them there. I'll put it up and go to the videos here so you can see. Just there's a video, educational videos on your website, and they're all here.
Yep, and there's more than one page of videos. Yeah, there's a soundbite one as well.
There you go. Deeper dive videos.
Yeah, these are the longer form, a little longer form videos, and then the soundbite videos, which are also on that video menu.
So
I
soundbite.
issue those every week. Every
Here you
week,
go.
5-minute video. Yep, soundbite videos. There you are. So with the linear tracker, yeah, the devil's in the details. Yes, it is the more accurate way to transcribe a record, but I have yet to see a linear bearing that doesn't cause more problems than it solves. There, said it.
So I'm going to still stick with linear trackers for a minute. The ones that were made like in the 80s by Technics, Yamaha, Pioneer versus ones that are on high-end audiophile turntables nowadays, how different are the linear tracking arms?
Well, there's the air bearing type.
Yes.
Then there's a slide way type, like the Clear Audio arm, and then there's the pivoted linear trackers.
The pivoted tangential, right? They call it, right?
Yes. And of the three, if I had to choose one technology, I'd use the pivoted linear because they have the higher possibility of being more the bearings are more rigidly held.
And for those that don't know, what that means is you have a pivoted arm, and then the head shell is where it's at the head shell where the swing happens, right? Is that what's going on with the tangential?
Usually it's both at the pivot and at the head shell. They both fit simultaneously. Yeah.
So JR, put your salesman hat on here. I don't have a high-end turntable. Are the tools worth the cost of purchasing? The real Jackson is asking.
Yeah, well, I'm a really crappy salesman. Sorry. I could give you a story on that one. It depends on your priorities, man. You love your turntable, you love what you got, but you know that you want to make sure that you've optimized what you got. Then maybe it's worth it to you. And remember, you got
here's how I'd frame it from a sales perspective. Mm-hmm. It's something that you're investing into, you'll have forever. So you might change turntables, but you'll still have the Wally tools.
Yeah.
So it's a good investment long term when you change up turntables. Or I go over to Michael T's house in Seattle. I'm like, Michael, I've got this Wally tools. Let's try it out in your system. So it's a good investment long term because most people don't have the same turntable throughout their entire lives. They're going to change it up.
And then are there also high-end audio dealers that specifically use Wally tools when they install carts for their customers?
Repeat, I'm sorry.
So are there dealers in the US or in the world that specifically use Wally tools products to install?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's even a couple dealers who make the pitch to their clients. Look, if you really want to get this right, we'll send the cartridge to JR for analysis and we'll put it in. Oh, absolutely. There's quite a growing number of dealers that are using these tools. Yes.
Jeffrey's asking, I have an old air bearing Versa Dynamics linear tracking TT.
Yep. Hello, Jeffrey. He's a client of mine. Yes, he does. And yeah, that's a venerable arm.
I wanted to. I haven't recognized a lot of these viewers' names, so I want to welcome everyone to the Live Audiophile Roundtable, and thank you for, I guess, first time. A lot of these viewers first time watching the show, and
I recognize some of the names.
yeah, like JR and I were talking.
So
thank you for joining. Lots of stuff.
Yeah, the comment you have on, I've noticed it on the Techniques arms where it's like crabbing. The servo motor is, they call it crabbing because you can see the arm kind of making micro adjustments from the servo motor.
Yeah, and I did a video called The Microscopic World of Analog, where I go into, well, how tiny are the perturbations in the groove wall?
So is that the microscope right there?
Well, that's a microscope, and I told you earlier that I'm a crappy salesman. When people call me to ask about that, I usually try to talk them out of buying it. Because for
the
one-third,
I like it. It's called the Wally scope. I hope you got it trademarked.
For 1/3 the cost of that thing, they can send it to me for analysis, and we'll know a hell of a lot more about the Cartridge.
So that's the skater right there.
That's
right?
a skater, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then this is the Wally Tracker Universal.
Yes, that's to set your overhang and align your cantilever.
And that you have Bearwold and Lofgren on it, but not Stevenson,
Bearwold,
right?
no, I won't do Stevenson, and I did a video on why I won't do Stevenson.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, the Wally scope, it's not for everybody. No, I don't care if I ever sell another one of those.
We're gonna take two more questions. We're getting past our time here. So GFY is asking, my thinking is that if one sets up their tone arm correctly on entry-level turntables, will always sound better than an incorrectly set up tone arm on a high-end, expensive turntable. And that's an interesting question. I like the thinking there. Thoughts, JR?
Yeah, this can be very true. Of course, the degree to which it is true depends on how screwed up your alignment is right now, right? I've seen this exact situation multiple times. And so, yes, it is actually really remarkable how much more you can unlock from the groove. Just pay attention to physics and geometry well enough to do that.
Charles Part, hey JR, can you explain the physics? I mean, you just mentioned this, the physics of your recent recommendations to play below the recommended tracking force range of a cartridge. So explain to the folks below the tracking, because I know on my record player behind me, I've got a pure fidelity turntable. I'm using someone's gonna yell at me because I said record player, but turntable. I'm about a 2 on my tracking on my right now.
2.0.
Okay.
Yeah, 2.0.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So thank you, Charles. Yes, I do recommend that once people have their setup properly lined, that they experiment. I did a video on this. Experiment with lower and lower tracking forces, and don't worry about manufacturer minimum. Don't worry about it. As long as it continues to sound better, go for it. And there's a reason why. I'm not sure if I can go into all the details of why, but this won't work for everybody, because you do need a rigid arm, you do need proper alignment, and you do benefit from relatively high effective mass. But it's remarkable how much more, when you see what happens when you got a high tracking force, you're compressing the damper at the top side, and uncompressing at the bottom. So the lower the tracking force, the more you're symmetrically compressing the damper, which allows more freedom for the pivot to make the tiniest movements. We're talking in the nanometer range, low nanometer range. Again, I did a video on that. So and also with a lower tracking force comes lower maximum and minimum skating force. So there's less horizontal torquing on the damper. Again, it's all about the damper, relaxing that damper as much as possible. Okay, that's as simple as I can go without going into a rabbit hole.
Well, we're going to leave it at that, but Michael's asking, why just not set up an already set up turntable? And we did ask it at the very beginning. I said, why don't you talk to the manufacturers, get the WallyTools, stuff right in the box. You open up the box and there's WallyTools and there's your turntable. Is that a possibility from a marketing sales strategy for Wally?
So
for WAM engineering?
It can, but a lot of people like to verify, from trust but verify, right? So, and you need the tools for that. But also, tone arm behavior changes, and I don't fully understand this, but it is true, we can measure it. Tone arm behavior changes its characteristics over time. And the more rigid the wire on the inside, the more it does so from even season to season. You know, when the ambient temperature in the room gets higher or lower depending on summer or winter, we see the torque forces on the arm changing, and it has subtle but audible effects on the performance. So people who own the Wally Skater, I tell them you got to use that a minimum of twice per year to check on the arm's torque, right? Because there's multiple things that could go besides just the wiring unfurling, as it naturally will do over time. When that's stored energy, it's going to transfer that energy somewhere. Well, we don't want it to be transferred ultimately to the damper. So yeah, we would like to trust that the dealers set it all up, but I get a lot of people who call me and say, hey, I recently got a turntable and it sounds pretty good, but I don't know, I'm just not, maybe something is a little bit wrong and I just don't trust that they did the full job. And then almost inevitably I will hear back from those people once they've used the tool, say, oh wow, here's what's happened, I've found this, found that, and the performance just went from here to there. You know, so yeah.
JR, really appreciate coming on the show.
You're welcome. It's been fun to be here.
Viewers, www.WallyAnalog.com. Lots of videos like you were mentioning, lots of products, and they can contact you through email, phone.
And JR, what's your YouTube channel called?
Oh my Lord. See, I'm a bad salesman.
I should look it up myself because I subscribe to you.
I put all of the videos also on my website. Yeah. So
yeah,
if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, it'll come up in your feed. Is it Wally Analog Tools Setup Tools or something like that?
Yeah, it's actually called WallyTools Analog Setup Tools. WallyTools is one word. WallyTools Analog Setup Tools.
Yes. There we go.
There we go.
Thanks for telling me what I should know.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. It was a great. We want to keep these tight, like I was saying, right? So I mean, there's lots we can go. We'll do this again. We'll do this again for sure. WallyTools Analog Setup Tools is the YouTube channel. We've got JR from, I guess it's WAM Engineering or WallyTools Analog. Thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, thank you again for watching the Live Audiophile Roundtable. Until again, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good weekend, you guys. Bye.